I'm excited today to have Jonathan Baldock as our guest. Jonathan works in an advisory role for Social HP. With 10 years working at LinkedIn, serving customers as varied as Accenture, JP Morgan Chase, Johnson & Johnson, PepsiCo, Hershey's, and IBM, among others, Jonathan is highly skilled in social sharing best practices, utilizing earned media as a results-focused evergreen channel. He's an expert in social media recruitment, sales, and marketing strategies. Jonathan, welcome to the Go for Launch podcast.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Excellent. I always start by asking people, where are you in the world today?
I am currently in Toronto, Canada.
Nice. All right. Got a little bit of accent going so I can hear that. I think you're
That's right.
Toronto. Are you a native of Canada?
I am. I'm a native Torontonian.
Excellent. All right. Well, I've worked with some folks up there, so you can always tell. So the accent, I love it. Toronto's a great place too. So we're going to be talking about two very cool subjects today, which I'm very passionate about as well. One is employee advocacy, and the other one is social selling. So we'll get into those in a moment. But I'm curious, I mentioned in the bio, Jonathan, you worked at LinkedIn for 10 years. What was your role at LinkedIn?
I had two main roles. The first one was building social media recruitment strategies for LinkedIn's largest global customers. That was a little over 5 years. And then the second was delivering employee advocacy platforms and programs across the same sort of set of clients. Their use cases varied from talent acquisition, marketing, social selling, and brand reputation.
Awesome. So we'll be getting into all that. So I noticed one thing that you shared in your materials to me beforehand was that companies with a successful employee advocacy program are 58% more likely to attract and 20% more likely to retain top talent. And also, salespeople who regularly share quality content through social channels are 45% more likely to attain quota. So lots of good stuff going on there. Let me ask you to break it down for us. And we'll talk with first, what is employee advocacy? What are we talking about there?
In the net of it, it's you want your employees saying great things about the company. They want to say great things about the company. They work there. They're proud to work there. They just don't know where to find the information. And so employee advocacy is really about empowering your employees to talk on behalf of the company and share things like thought leadership, industry news, and company content. And if they do that with the right mix, so that they're not just a talking voice for the company, pumping out ads like buy, then it works really, really well.
Okay. What are some of those benefits? Let's say if a company does have an active employee advocacy program with lots of, frontline workers sharing content from the company, what can benefit from that?
Well, I think one is that it's a different strategy altogether from an ad campaign. So when we look at content, typically it's broken into 3 different buckets. You've got owned, paid, and earned. And owned would be your website, your social channels that are your corporate channels. So your LinkedIn company page, your Facebook corporate page, et cetera, et cetera. Then you've got paid, which would be, I'm going to run a targeted ad campaign. Maybe I go to Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram, Twitter, and I say, I want this ad to go in front of these people for this period of time in this location at this level, whatever parameters you set, and you run that. And when you run that ad campaign, usually it's asking somebody to do something. Click here, visit this, download that, buy our products and services. Whereas advocacy and the earned channel is an ongoing conversation. So you don't have to rush. You don't have to be, here's our product, here's our service. You can really talk about how you're participating in the industry. You could elevate the profile of employees with their thought leadership because you'll have subject matter experts and different executives within the organization. You can talk about how you participate in the community. There's a variety of different things you can do. And that approach really works with a typical marketing or sales funnel, which is that the idea that, we put one ad in front of somebody and then that's going to cause them to act. Usually, if it does cause them to act, you had many touch points with them beforehand. Mm-hmm. So if I'm thinking about buying a new car and I'm driving down the street and I see an ad for a Mercedes on a billboard, I don't immediately turn my car, drive over to a Mercedes dealership and buy a Mercedes. Right. I'm going to do some research. I'm going to talk to friends. I'm going to learn about it. And so that's really what advocacy does, is it builds those touch points. You might end up with 15, 20, 100 touch points over the course of months or even years. And it's warming up that audience to what's your company about, really building a relationship between the brand and your target audience. And that target audience will vary. So that target audience could be, hey, we want to hire certain kinds of people. We've got employees that have that skill set, which means their connections are often the right kinds of people. We should be trying to get referrals. So building that relationship from a talent perspective, that's one way. But it also works from a sales or marketing perspective. And that's your employees are connected to your clients and they're connected to your prospects. And so you want that ongoing conversation. You want your employees to have the most professional profile, not just meaning like as in like their actual profile on a social network, but more you're raising their standing and making them, turning them into subject matter experts. And that develops that relationship that you want. So then that way, when your reps reach out to those clients, they're much more willing to have a conversation. They're much more approachable. And that's because they've been warmed up over the course of months of learning about your company.
Yeah, I'm going to say it all sounds great. And a lot of companies, that get it, if you will, are using employee advocacy and platforms like SocialHP, which we could talk about more. But I see a lot more companies that think, oh, that sounds awesome, we should do that. But then they don't do a good job. And so I want to play devil's advocate for a moment and talk to you
Sure.
about some of the downsides or some of the things that the pitfalls that people have going into it. Cause I've been in the room and been in companies where, it was my job to help spur employee advocacy on. And a couple of the big hurdles that I found, one was companies where the C-suite people refused to participate. So everybody else thought, well, if they're not going to do it, then why should I care? So that was one issue. That's a huge conundrum. But the other one was a lot of people that were reluctant to, advocate, quote, for the company because they thought, social media is mine. It's my time. It's my channels. I don't want to be shilling for the company. So don't ask me to promote stuff on the behalf of the company. What do you say to those companies that are grappling with either of those issues?
So I think one is how you approach it. Definitely you want executives involved. And I think that's really about the thought process of leadership. If they're, sometimes you think like, oh, I came from a stodgy company, so they're not, they're old school, they're still trying to fax me things at home, whatever that is, they don't want to adopt new technology. Well, then, and sometimes they're also like, oh, we have such a market share that we don't, that we don't think this is going to make a difference. So I think that's just a lack of information.
Mm-hmm.
And so showing them other executives at competitive organizations that are engaged and are doing things socially, I think that's step one, just to build up their awareness. But building their, getting their commitment, I think is important. A lot of times executives in companies have support, meaning they have an administrator or they have a communications team. So really the burden's probably going to fall on them. The executive doesn't need to be, writing original pieces and putting them out on a regular basis.
Right.
Usually their support team does it for them. So as long as that executive says, I understand there's value in being present on social networks, I can see, these other leaders within our industry, or perhaps just other business leaders, perhaps I should be a little more reflective of the market. That's I think a big step. So that's one, because then if you get it across the executive group, then of course employees are much more likely to say, yeah, this sounds like a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think, letting employees know we don't want you just to be a shell for the company. So having the right cadence of content is also important. At LinkedIn, we had a really good ratio. It was 3-2-1. So for every 6 pieces of content or stories that you share, 3 of them are thought leadership, 2 of them are industry news, and only 1 is related to the company. And that one that's related to the company doesn't have to be a product or a service. It could be, here's a little bit about our campus. Here's an employee that we think is fantastic that's been with our organization, like just highlighting good things about the organization, reminding the employees that they're actually at a great place and that they're doing good things. That ratio of thought leadership, industry news, and company content also makes employees typically feel good. Because now, if I'm sharing thought leadership, that's going to be valuable to my network. And if it's also relevant to my network, meaning like if I'm in sales, I share things that my clients want to see. If
Mhm.
I'm in marketing, I'm sharing things that, versus, whether I'm in, engineering or whatever kind of function I'm in, the content is relevant to me and my network. So that is a better story to tell to employees. And then just to say, you're right, your social networks are yours. And so it's really only engage on the platforms you feel most comfortable. In my experience, when I was at LinkedIn, when we had LinkedIn Elevate, which has since sunset, but when we had LinkedIn Elevate, it was LinkedIn's platform. Most of our clients, the employees would definitely sign on to LinkedIn, and only a very small percentage would sign on to things like Twitter and Facebook.
Right.
So they would just say, look, like, what I share on Facebook isn't really relevant to anybody that we're going to sell to, but really, on LinkedIn it is. And also there's a benefit to them to have a better profile on LinkedIn because it makes them more marketable. If they're
Yeah.
seen as a thought leader in the industry, that's good news for me as an individual. So if I can raise my professional standing to my peers and to my community, that makes my ability to market myself better, whether I'm trying to sell or whether I'm looking for another job in the future. And so these, I think, are all important factors that employees should know ahead of time. And the more we deliver that message and say, here's the ratio that we're looking to approach it with, here's the kind of information that we're going to make available to you, and we're going to make it super easy, then usually you'll get hands raised. But I will say that still doesn't solve the problem of usage, which is even if you get 1,000 employees to sign on, then the hardest part after that is actually getting them to log in and do it, which
Right.
is very difficult.
Yeah. So to that point, that is one thing I was going to mention is that often it falls on the marketing department to do the job of curating, creating that content, and then essentially spoon feeding it to the employee base and saying, "Here you go, here's some great content." But I've seen that fall flat too. How does Social HP help alleviate that? If you've got great content and you want to get your employees to share it, how does Social HP help in that regard?
Yeah. So this is not just like you would have seen it. I've seen it across 500 corporate clients when I was at LinkedIn, and it's pretty consistent. So the overall average usage on a monthly basis is 20%.
Mm,
So meaning if you get 1,000 employees to sign up, 200 of them will probably log in and use it, and the other 800 who raised their hand, signed up, literally connected their networks, did all that work, they won't.
yeah.
And that's because they're not social media experts.
Hmm.
They're not experts at choosing content. They're also not copywriters and choose like, oh, what do I need to say? And how do I make this compelling? They're just not. And so what you end up with is people that adopt new technology or people that really see the value and they're already socially engaged. Those are your social stars. Those are the ones that are going to adopt this technology and log in and do it frequently. The problem is, what do you do with that other 80% that
Mm,
raise their hand? But it's like, how many training seminars have we been to when you're in the training seminar, it all sounds amazing. And then they
yes.
give you a binder and they say every week you're going to go into the binder and you're going to fill out your goals or your notes or whatever it is. And then you go, okay, great. Yeah. And then you take the binder back and you slip it onto the desk and you never look at it again. This is the
Too many.
same,
Yeah.
same sort of thing. I can tell you it's every single training seminar for me. You learn when you're there and then everything else, it just disappears.
Hmm.
So I want to do what will make my job easier. I don't want to do any more lifting than I have to. And so what Social HP has done, which is kind of the opposite, is that one, we have it set up for everybody that wants to go in and do it, which is that 20%. But we have a solution for the other 80%. And that is an administrator can go in and let's say it's the sales team. Let's say there's 200 people in the sales team. And here's a message that would be applicable perhaps for all of them. Then what the administrator can do is choose several different kinds of images, several different copies to why people would want to click on it as to your message to your network. And then they can put that across those salespeople's networks and automatically schedule it for the salespeople. And
Hmm.
basically the salespeople can just say, hang on a second, you'll do all the heavy lifting for me. And the administrator within 30 seconds can drop something on 200 people's networks that they'll have to share it, not even on the same day at the same time. So it'll be spread over the course of whatever period of time that administrator wants. And there'll be multiple versions of that. So not everybody's also sharing the same thing. And then it gets spread across their networks. So now that message does actually happen, but the salespeople didn't have to do any of the lifting.
Oh, that's
And so
great.
in just a few seconds, I can get everybody else to participate. So the average monthly usage on social HP is 80%.
Oh,
And
wow.
we have a bunch of clients that have 100%.
Okay.
The ones that have 100%, it's because they basically said, hey, it's primarily a sales use case. And they just told the salespeople, this is so much easier than you having to log in. We'll just take care of it for you. And the salespeople said that made sense. There are
Mm,
going to be certain percentage of the people that sign up that say, this sounds great, but I still want to approve it. Like, I don't want you to just blindly put it on my calendar. And so
sure.
that's what's called a locked calendar. And we have that as well. So I can, as the administrator, put something on your calendar for you to go out next week on Wednesday at 2. But then what happens is on Tuesday, you'll receive an email saying, this is all set to go out on Wednesday. Can you just hit the approval button, or do you want to edit it? And then
Mm,
you have that choice. And that's why there's that 20%, because often they still have good intentions, which is, oh, great, yeah, I'll review and approve it. And some do, but there's still a percentage that want that approval mechanism, but then always forget and never approve anything. And then what you usually have to do as the administrator is say, hey, for the last month, like, I scheduled 8 things for you and you didn't approve any of it.
mm.
So can you just either approve it, or do you want to just give it a shot and, like, let us actually do this for you and see how it goes? And then usually when you have that conversation, then they're like, okay, yeah, you're right. I'm probably never going to approve anything. Go ahead. Let's see
Sure.
how it goes.
Yeah,
And
because
as
people
long
have the
as
best intentions, but like you
they
said, they get
do,
busy and they forget to
they
approve
do.
stuff.
Exactly. So, and then that's how they then go from 80% usage up to 100, is when they, slowly fix those areas where everyone's approaching it with the best intention. And as long as those administrators stick to that sharing cadence, meaning they're not just pumping out company content, but they're pumping out, like, thought leadership and industry news, and it's very relevant to that employee's network, that employee's pretty excited about it, because now I look smart
Hmm.
and I didn't have to do anything to look smart. And if you can make me look good and I didn't have to do anything to do it, people usually want to sign up for that.
It's such a mutually beneficial thing. However, I think a lot of employers think, oh
Mhm.
my gosh, if my people look too smart, then they're going to get groomed and they're going to leave, et cetera. That's just reality, right? And so I think forward thinking employers will embrace the concept of employee advocacy because they'll realize a rising tide raises all ships. So if we're
100%.
all looking smart and we're all out there on our networks attracting attention to our thought leadership and occasionally our plugs for our own products and services, then that can't hurt. And you know what? People will leave. That's just reality of it. So why penalize people for looking smart? Make it easier for them. To your point, Jonathan, is that's awesome that the platform enables companies to help everybody improve their profile on LinkedIn or wherever they feel comfortable. So that's great.
Well, to that end, I would say, it just like that idea that I said, when you're driving down the road and you see a Mercedes sign, you don't immediately drive into the Mercedes dealership and just buy one because you're like, well, I saw the sign, I
Yeah.
had to go. So if I see a job for, an advert for a job online, I don't go, well, I guess I have to apply for that and work there now. I'm only going to leave the company when I'm ready to leave. And
Hmm.
it's only going to be for the role that I really want to move to. If someone's going to leave, they're going to leave. There's not a lot of things, not a lot you can do about it. But if you can put them in a better standing so that when they actually a good thing. And it also means that you're raising the brand of your company so that everyone that works there looks amazing. So if I want to now work at another company and I don't work at yours and everyone looks amazing, I want to be one of those people that looks amazing. It's the
Sure.
reason why brands like Google and Apple have such an easy time recruiting people, because they have such a reputation. It's such a strong brand that people really want to be associated with it. Well, why wouldn't
Yeah.
you want your brand to look like Google and Apple and some of the other technology companies that everyone wants to work at? So raising the profile of your brand through your employees is such a compelling way to do it.
Definitely. Are you at liberty to share any of the companies that work with Social HP?
We have some success stories on our website, and we're adding a few more right now. Like, we're adding companies all the time, and so we'll add some more use cases and some more success stories on, but there's still a handful in there that you can take a look at. So take a look at those ones. They're not available off the top of my head, but my clients are, and they're not case studies, so I can't name them unless
Got it.
they
Yeah, I
give me
know there's a lot
permission.
of privacy because some people don't
Yeah.
want that. It's almost like a secret sauce for them. They don't
It,
necessarily
it
want their competitors to know, hey, I'm using this platform to make us all look smarter than you.
It
So,
is, and it's because it's the great equalizer that a lot of companies don't know about. So we like in my world when I was working at LinkedIn, my assumption was everybody's doing this.
mm,
And the answer is no, very few companies are doing this in the grand scheme of how many companies are out there. I'm dealing with all the forward thinking companies, but there's so many that weren't doing anything about it. And if
yeah,
you
you're
take
right.
it,
I mean, I've
you,
seen that through the years. And you mentioned
sure,
the 80/20 rule where 80% of people don't do anything. It's more, and I kind of, most of the times think it's more like 90/10. So,
right. Yeah.
um,
There's a big
which
disparity.
it always makes those 10 to 20% of people stand out, especially on LinkedIn, with close to 700 million members or whatever they got now.
Yeah, there's 740 million members now.
But out of that pool, I think 15% or something post on a weekly basis or something roughly like
It's
that, right?
exactly
And so it's,
that's the difference, right? Very small percentage.
yeah,
And take an example. I'll pick like a small company. Let's say they have 50 employees. The average company that has 50 employees has somewhere between 800 and 1,000 followers on LinkedIn.
mm,
That includes their 50 employees, which means if they do a company page update, between 800 and 1,000 people are going to see that update.
mm-hmm,
The average person on the LinkedIn network has 800 connections.
mm,
So if I just get one employee to share that, I've doubled my reach. But if
mm.
I get all of my employees to share that, it'll hit 40,000 people. So now my company can have the voice of 40,000 people instead of 800 or 1,000.
And it's
And
got to
what
be a
size?
whole lot, yeah, much cheaper than trying to reach all those people through ads or whatever.
The amount of money it would take to constantly be reaching 40,000 people on LinkedIn is pretty astronomical. The smallest campaign
Yes.
I ever did was $10,000 and it only lasted a few weeks for one of my
Mm.
clients. We had clients that were spending millions of dollars a year on paid campaigns on LinkedIn.
Wow.
Very effective. Like these paid campaigns are very effective, but it's a lot of money.
Yeah,
And
and LinkedIn is awesome. You and I love it. You worked there 10 years. I helped them
yeah,
launch Sales Navigator. I love it.
yeah,
However, ads on LinkedIn are definitely more expensive than other places. So
completely.
it's pay to play big time.
Well, and they're more expensive because they work. But
Mm,
now if you think like, okay, so my 50-person company can reach 40,000 people. What size of a company has 40,000 followers? Well, on average, they have 2,000 employees.
mm,
So my small company of 50 people can now appear the same size as a company with 2,000 employees
mm,
because they're not doing anything with advocacy and we are. So that's the great equalizer. The
right.
amount of money I would have to spend to have the same impression or to be able to compete with one of my competitors that's 100 times my size or 50 times my size is astronomical. Yet to run a 50-person campaign with SocialHP is $4,500 for the year.
Mm,
It's cheap. It's half the price of one tiny campaign on LinkedIn, and you've got an evergreen channel for the entire year.
right.
So for me, there's no better way to spend your money because you're reaching the people that you care about in so many different ways, not just from a sales marketing perspective, but also from a talent attraction and retention standpoint too.
Right. And it's all organic. And so, speaking of, we've been talking mostly about employee advocacy. Can you just
Yep,
spend a couple minutes talking about the other side of the coin, which is social selling, which I
sure.
believe LinkedIn kind of coined the phrase years
They
ago?
did. They did. And LinkedIn actually has a social selling index. So you can Google
Right.
social selling index. They'll have a link. You can type in your profile and then it'll tell you what your ranking is. So, yeah, there's a few things. Social selling is broken down into a few categories. One of them is your participation on LinkedIn, meaning are you sharing content? Are you commenting? Are you connecting with people? Are you using the various tools? Because they saw, and you had that stat off the top, they saw that people that are engaged in those kinds of behaviors are way more likely to hit their sales quota. And so one of them is sharing content. Another one is using tools like Sales Navigator, where you can, you put in your clients that you're targeting. It'll show you how you're connected into that company, who can give you a referral in so you can get warm leads. It'll also deliver information. So it'll constantly be watching, like, are they in the news? Did they launch a new product? Did somebody get promoted? Is one of your contacts leave? Did somebody join that you should know about? So it's constantly keeping you up to date on the comings and goings of that company. And that information is vital as a salesperson. So social selling is really about utilizing the power of your social network and the social networks of your company in order to sort of take steps towards the sales process, building that awareness on the top of the sales funnel, constantly adding in new activity towards the top of the sales funnel. So then that way, when you get down to those important conversations, they're much more likely to happen and close deals.
Sure. And what you were saying is LinkedIn obviously is the place for that. But what's cool about it is, as you're describing it, most people don't realize that, there's first, second, and third degree connections. First is if you and I are directly connected, that's awesome. If you're second, that may mean that Joe is a friend of yours or former colleague or whatever, and I might want to meet Joe. I can go through you and say, "Hey, Jonathan, would you mind introducing me to Joe?" And you probably say, sure, if the reason is good. And then
Yep.
suddenly I'm first degree connection with Joe. And then the layer on top of that with regard to social HP is that as I'm sharing content, the more people I have in my first degree network is more people that could see my stuff in their feed, right?
Yeah. Not only that, but also let's say you're a prospect that I'm looking to sell to. If we're first degree connections, that's brilliant for me, because if I share a story and you like, comment, click, anything public facing that will deliver this story to your network, if you work at a company, odds are you have a lot of those company connections there.
Mm.
So if you know 50 people at your company, including probably everyone on the buying team, so if you're one of my potential buyers and you like, comment, or reshare that story, thanks, Jonathan, appreciate you sharing this. All of a sudden, everyone that is a buyer at the company now sees my update.
Mm.
So now my brand and me personally have been put in front of all those buyers, plus a whole bunch of other people at that company. And so it's the power of being able to get in front of those people so that you're building that awareness, because then not only have we connected, but the odds of me being able to now connect with other people in that buying group is going to be improved because you've already got some familiarity. They're now like, oh yeah, I've seen Jonathan's post before. Oh, he's
Mm-hmm.
got some really good stuff. Yeah, my colleague has been clicking on his stuff for a while. Yeah, that's interesting. I'd like to hear what he has to say. And then connection, opportunity to meet, and away we go.
Absolutely. Well, this is all outstanding information. We could keep talking about this stuff for hours because it sounds like we're both geeks for this stuff.
Totally.
But I know you have a hard stop. I want to ask, where can people learn more about social HP and figure out if it's right for them?
Sure. So socialhp.com. It's pretty straightforward for our website. Or they can email me. It's just jonathan@socialhp.com. Or they can just find me on LinkedIn. It's Jonathan Baldock. So and my URL is my name. So meaning I've customized the LinkedIn URL. It doesn't have my member number. It just has my name in it. So you can just go LinkedIn/in/Jonathan Baldock and you find me. So
Excellent.
happy to have a conversation with anybody in the network, and we can certainly steer them in the right way.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much, Jonathan. I look forward to getting this out there and hopefully send some folks your way so that they can really improve their efforts on employee advocacy and social selling at the same time.
Much appreciated. Thank you so much for having me.